Hi again, everybody. We've had plenty of lectures under our belts now. Now it's time for visual problem solving. Your task is to go into the real world now and make not only order from chaos, but beautiful pictures. This is tough, but we're going to figure some things out in this lecture. Let's take a typical thing for me, typical problem. I'm in Mozambique in Africa for National Geographic. We've got a mountain range shown in the background here. Trying to photograph the local people that live in those mountains in such a way that it gives them dignity, and yet the ambient light's rough. This is a midday gathering, and the only time I'm going to be able to photograph many of these folks in their best clothing. I must show the mountains in the background because that's where they live. I have to light it all beautifully if I can, and all I have is the gear on my back. The event's going to be over before the light gets good again, so what do? This is tough. Light's harsh. We move over into the trees. That's the first step, to shade things a little bit. So, here we go. In this little portrait, we've got a group of women here and their kids, and I use my little softbox, and I underexpose the background, purposely. It's the middle of the day, I've got to turn down those house lights somehow. That's how I handled this, underexposing the background. Solve the problem in that we're not overpowered by the light of the sun, and we're able to light everybody's skin very subtly with nice soft light from a handheld softbox. We get this nice sense of place here. Little bit more flash. Now we've got color. Everybody looks lovely. People away from the flash are a little bit more darkly lit, but it works. It works out. It's a way of salvaging a situation in very tough light. Another example. Here's famed biologist E.O. Wilson with Greg Carr, both great guys, and they're looking through plans of what they're going to do on a BioBlitz. Basically, a BioBlitz is Dr. Wilson's rapid assessment of an area's plant and animal species, usually with the help of local folks to round things up. These guys are planning the next day's events. You can see a little twilight in the sky, and it looks like we're at a lodge out in the bush, and we are. So, on the day of the blitz, the sun is shining very brightly and the local kids are scrambling, but the light is harsh again, so what to do? I capture what I can by shooting through a bag of the insects they've collected, and I underexpose the scene drastically. That's one thing I do. Or I shoot the kids in the deep shade of a waterfall, where the waterfall in the trees blocks the sun. Nice shade, middle of a sunny day, but you know what? Anything to stay out of harsh light like this. Anything I can do to stay out of the harsh light. What else? Let's take another look at another situation. Look at the color palette in this. Very lovely. This is a black-headed oriole getting removed from a mist net that a biologist had set up to do leg banding of birds. Look at the color. Now, how do we show this bird? How do we get that sort of an intimate shot? Again, middle of the day, harsh light. I'm using a 70mm lens, but I'm very close, and I'm at 2.8. To solve the problem, wide open aperture. You could also use a macro lens on this to get the same blurring effect behind the bird. I love the fact, by the way, that we've got this soft green fleece jacket in the background. The black and yellow of the bird just pop right out against it. It's very nice and subtle. It's a good way of handling something, again, very cluttered, and in the middle of the day, we're in open shade. That's really a nice way to do it. Another few portraits here using my flash equipment, as we've discussed before. Biologists at the park are capturing the animals pretty much round the clock. Whenever there's some sun, and even at night when there's bats to be caught, we're able to do close-up pictures of all these different critters, no matter what the light is outside. I'm controlling the light. See, there's no clouds in the sky at that time of the year, so the light's pretty harsh in the middle of the day, always really. We have to figure out a good way of making great pictures of little bitty critters in harsh light. So, first, we just shoot in soft light, and then we create our own with flashes. We shade the subject, and we throw our own flash in to really up the ambient light level, combining with flash. Get lots of depth of field that way. It looks subtle, but it's actually lit with flash and a combination of ambient light. So they're working together, lots of depth of field. Remember, a great picture needs three things: good light, good composition, and something interesting. Always, I think about that. And sometimes 2 out of the 3 are there, and sometimes just 1 maybe. But that's when you need to work on these other 2. Fix them if you can. That's the goal. You don't always get there, but if you're a real visual problem solver, you're working towards this. You're always thinking about, can I get the 3 elements? Can I get 2? Maybe just 1, but at least you're thinking about it. So let's put this into practice by starting in a really easy place to make pictures. and talking about why they're easy, and then moving into something more complex. So I thought, what's the simplest place that you can go to make good pictures? Antarctica. Okay, we talked about Antarctica a little bit before. It's a long way away, but you know what? In our lecture on backgrounds, we weren't thinking about visual problem solving as much. We were talking about clean backgrounds mainly, and it is true. Lots of clean backgrounds, beautiful soft light, kind of overcast light usually graces everything, and gregarious animals that are all around you come right up to you, in fact, like penguins and seals. There's seals laying on the ice. There's seals laying up close. There's no telephone poles, there's no billboards, no fence lines, no power lines, no white moving vans in the background, just ice and snow, and it's all in epic proportions. It's a fabulous place to do simple, clean, and dramatic landscapes. But you want to know the biggest problem there? There is a big problem. When do you want to break to eat? It's hard to leave when you see such good pictures everywhere and the light's good, every direction you look. If you can't make a good picture in Antarctica, really, it's because you're not trying. You can point your camera in almost any direction, and the animals are literally lying around in front of you. They have no fear of you. Quite remarkable. If you ever get a chance to go to Antarctica, boy, would I suggest it. It is epic. Visit South Georgia Island, too, while you're there. I mean, you're down there anyway. That's where a lot of these pictures were taken, either on the Antarctica thumb or on South Georgia Island. Quite amazing. The animals just walk right up to you to say hello. They have no fear of people. It is amazing. In Antarctica, really, I think about the horizon a lot. There's different horizon lines in all these pictures, aren't there? Constantly. I'm moving the horizon up and down, choosing where the horizon should go. I'm thinking high and low. What do I think about? I think about horizon lines as being one of the only problems to solve, even in Antarctica. I think about that constantly. I look at framing all the time, too. Icebergs drifting by so slowly in the water. There's no excuse for not taking your time and really framing them properly. I use the rule of thirds a lot. Sometimes I'll center an iceberg. Most of the time I put it off on one side or another. It just depends. Kind of let one side breathe if the iceberg's on the other side. Really let the viewer study the background. You can't go wrong. It's just abstract art all day long. It's really great. So, of course, the star of the show down there for me is penguins. And I'm always thinking about, well, how do I really go beyond the obvious and find a very interesting thing? Like fish in a barrel with penguins, it is. But I want a big, big, deep scene. I want to see a lot of where we are. I want to see deep blue icebergs carved into weird shapes by melting or erosion. I want to see penguins up close and these beautiful epic scenes, plenty of depth of field. If you can notice it, usually you can get it. Of all the pictures I shot down there, by the way, this is probably my favorite. In terms of layering, there's no better place to make a layered picture, in my opinion. You've got interesting animals in the foreground, the rest of their groups in the middle ground, some of the most beautiful scenery on Earth in the background. This is all right at sunrise. And I knew when I shot this is probably the best thing I was ever going to see in my entire life. And that's okay. I don't see how it could ever get any better than that. And it never has gotten any better, actually. It's a great place to go if you can. So it's impossible to go wrong unless you don't know how to expose things if you go to Antarctica. That's a nice place. It's a nice place for problem solving. It's very easy there. Now let's talk about the next level of complexity in problem solving, what I call the minor leagues, rural America, the countryside. Not too many distractions there. It's a nice place, but in the countryside, we are starting to see some elements that can junk up pictures if you let them. Things like roads and fences and railroad tracks and buildings and windmills and trees. So in this case, rural America. You know how to handle these things now, though. You've had this course. You know how to look at water towers and phone lines and the occasional pickup truck as elements that can actually add to your image, right? They're important compositional elements here to be taken advantage of. So instead of letting this get in your way, make that fence rail a framing element. Instead of letting it ruin your pictures, you can enhance your pictures by showing viewers where you were when you pressed the shutter button, right? In most everyday situations, the number one problem is compositional, and one you are already equipped to deal with because of this course. Cluttered backgrounds. Change that perspective. Walk around your subject, all 360 degrees, high angle, low angle, bird's eye view, worm's eye view, all the things you know. Figure out which direction the light looks best. Try these different vantage points. Get down low. Don't be afraid to get your clothes dirty. It's fine. Get down low, get up high, whatever it takes. That's what it takes. Don't care for the background? You can use panned action as well. Did you know that? Of course you did. You've been listening. You've been paying attention. If you don't like, say, the background that a tiger has in an enclosure, fine, use panned action. Clean the background up. Make it look lovely. All you see is the tiger now and a wash of green. Panned action is an excellent way of cleaning up a background, but you got to practice to get good at it. You don't want it to be too slow. You don't want it to be too fast. You have to practice. Practice makes perfect. You know what? The beauty of a digital camera is you can see immediately on the back if you're getting the effect you like. So why not play around with it? Something as simple as, let's say, a snowy road can be worth a picture if you spend some time framing it well. This may not be a prize winner, but it definitely communicates the bone-chilling cold and stillness in the air when this was taken. This picture could use one more element, by the way. I like the leading lines going into it. But boy, if it had a little figure out there, a deer, a person, horse-drawn sleigh, anything, something very small in the background, those tracks in the road would be leading right to it, and it would be really wonderful. It's kind of a nice scene or stage here, but we could have used a player to really take it up a level. Maybe next time it snows hard, I'll get out there and do that. Oh wait, here's what I'm talking about, right here. I have done that. Snowy road in Yellowstone National Park, leading lines going into it, and now we do have a player there, a bison. I was out there looking for gray wolves, only there were no wolves to be found that morning or any other my first 2 or 3 weeks out there. Talk about nerve-wracking. I was actually on assignment. Couldn't find wolves. I'm doing a story on gray wolves. That's a problem. So I took pictures of whatever else I could find out of nervousness, I guess, in this case, bison. I really like the way the road takes you to him, literally leading lines, and the fact that the bison fits perfectly right there on the road, his horn fits in there. I like the way the road frames him a bit, and I like that this is a nice stage with one player on it. A player's appeared, and the road takes you to it. The bison's a little bit of a payoff visually. I remember it was 30 below zero that morning, and my assistant Nathan Varley had made excellent sandwiches that day, and that was the high point. We did get our wolves, but it was 3 weeks of waiting it out. We did eventually get wolves, and then that was lovely. Out of 8 weeks of being in the park, by the way, we got about 20 minutes of being with wild wolves, but it was enough to do the story. I guess that's one of the reasons I love still photography so much. You know, a picture, like a good song, can immediately take you back to a time and place when something excellent or exciting was going on. Maybe just the bone-chilling cold. It got to 49 degrees below zero one time out there, and I had to go to the bathroom. That was really bad. But these pictures remind me of a place and a time when I was very happy and much younger. So that's all right. Pictures do that for us. By looking around and simply thinking about how to compose pictures, working in good light, watching our backgrounds, shooting an interesting subject, we are in fact problem solving with every push of our shutter button. That's what we're doing. Now let's talk about the ultimate task in problem solving, one that many of us have to deal with all the time, working in a city, producing great pictures in a city, very cluttered. We call this the big game, urban landscapes. How in the world do you work in a place like this? That's a tough one. The urban environment is complex, fast-paced, chock full of distractions. I dare say it's more distracting than a casino when you first walk in. As a photographer, you're really going to have to fight to have a clean window to shoot in, aren't you? You're going to have to concentrate. What is it that you want to show about this city? Point your camera, look, and think about it. Really think. What do you want to show? There's all sorts of things to show. For my money, an Italian festival is excellent. This is in Boston, where they carry a saint around the streets. I enjoyed it. I'm Italian, the food was good, the people are happy, a lot of light and color, a lot of fun. So that, for me, is something that says something about the city. I thought about it, I hung out, wish there was some ambient light in the sky, but there's not, but I still enjoyed myself. What else do you want to try to show? How about a signature thing from New York? Something like taxis. How can you show those in a new and different way? Maybe it's like this, maybe it's out the window, maybe it's looking straight down. Not that this is a great shot, but at least the perspective's different. Maybe once you get into a big city, you just want to stay in your hotel room and mope because there's too many choices. I can hear you, I understand. I've shot quite a bit both in Boston and New York. Let's talk a little bit about how I handle a lot of the confusion and a lot of the noise and the hassle of shooting in cities. Remember, light, composition, and something interesting. It all applies in big cities too. So the first thing I think of when I get into cities is they've got big buildings that really shape the light and shadow at all times of the day, don't they? They truly do. Even in the middle of the day in a big city, you've got buildings throwing huge shadows across the streets. It doesn't matter what time of day it is almost. It's not like you're out in the open, out in a pasture somewhere where there's nothing to block the sun. So you really need to think about light and time of day differently here. You've got good light sources all day long in a city, but you have to look for them, don't you? You do have to look for them. You have big skyscrapers throwing darkness and reflection, and people are walking between these giant monster buildings. They're so small comparatively. It's very dramatic and very powerful. There's a lot of visual potential here, but you really have to think about narrowing it down. There are too many choices. It is overwhelming. So many choices. You have to be strategic and surgical almost. You must be discerning and selective. That's really tough. So if I need to tell the story of a place, what do I want to say? Truly, we know the technical side of photography now. How do you want to say it? What do you want to say? Do I want to say get away from the downtown core and show the city in the background? How do you do that? Well, like here on a cocktail party on a boat, that's one way. This is out in New York Harbor. You see the background is the city, and the background's also water, and this is a nice novel way of doing it. Plus, you have people having a good time on a boat. Look at this couple. They're obviously in love or some such thing, and there are other couples in the background. You can see they're all talking, but they're smaller in the frame. Our main couple, right up close. I just sit there and wait for the expression, wait for the moment, wait for them to forget I was there. A good 15 minutes of my time spent on this couple. I liked her shimmery gold top, and I thought they had good chemistry. Their body positions were very good. Loved the beam of light coming in on her face. It was all really great. But you have to wait for a little moment to happen, a little connection. It's not enough sometimes just to get the composition right. We need some action and a little magic. Now look also where I've positioned the heads of everybody by height. By moving the camera to a certain height, I've kept their heads against the water as the background. That way we see them clearly, don't we? They stand out. Even though they're slightly out of focus and they're much smaller in the frame, they still stand out. Imagine if I'd gotten a little lower. You wouldn't have been able to see the water nearly as much, and their heads would have all been up in the skyline. It would have been a big mess. Cluttered background sticking out of people's heads, no thanks. By being in the exact right height position here and thinking about the height of the camera, I put those people exactly where they need to be. The picture reads clearly that way. Now, I haven't told them what to do or anything. I'm just hanging out. But I'm choosing the height. I'm putting those heads where I want them just by moving the camera, that's all. These are all very subtle things, aren't they? Most people would just take a picture. But now that you're learning all this stuff, you're learning how professional photographers do it. Each and every time I pick up a camera for any reason, I think about that composition. I think about that background, the placement of the horizon line, the subjects, the people. That's all really critical if you want to solve visual problems. I worry about shadows and highlights in cities and backgrounds, sure, but mostly I worry about getting something that sings, something that's interesting. And even in a big city that's full of action, that's a problem to solve too. Years ago, I was doing a story on Boston. I had to show the physical properties of the city, sure, but I also had to shoot as many surprising and interesting things as I could. A very tall order for a kid from Nebraska who had never been there before. I tried to do my homework, but I also tried to keep an open mind for anything else that came up, like this lady. This lady's name was Hedda Rev Curry, and she was just a lovely person. She owned a restaurant. I went in there, it was very popular, just bathed in this red light. She loved the red light of this restaurant. She's actually a doctor. And just a lovely person, and she would sit with me and talk to me when I went in there for dinner. She owned the place, it was a lot of fun. And she said, you know, you need to photograph me walking my dog, Joel. And I went, And she said, I have a pet Dalmatian. He's a really lovely dog. And I was like, sure. And she says, I wear my fake Dalmatian coat when I walk him. We really turn heads. Some people yell Cruella de Vil at me. I was like, well, my ears picked up then. I mean, for sure. Seriously? When do you walk your Dalmatian wearing your full-length fake Dalmatian skin coat, I asked, and she said, well, each fall and winter. So I remembered that. Now, unfortunately, it was July when she had that conversation with me, but I am nothing if not patient. I made sure I called her in the fall when I went back to Boston, and it was really worth the wait. When I went back there, we spent late afternoon together one day and we just went for a walk. It was lovely. One of my favorite pictures of my whole career came out of this little walk. It's just unusual and different. And it isn't this. I worked it. I waited. I was patient. And I thought about what would make the frame read. It's this one, just the last beams of light. The background's clean enough here to make things pop out. It doesn't have that much information. They're not even facing my way. But what is there doesn't get in the way. I think this one is still used on a greeting card now and then. It's just clean, it works, and it's a little bit of a mystery. One of my favorite pictures of this very, very elegant lady. You know, right after that in Boston, I learned about a prayer meeting in a burnt out neighborhood by talking with some folks. You can actually see the burnt out shell of the building across the street and the graffiti. This is a religious organization praying for their neighborhood to be restored, to restore some order there. That to me was interesting, and the editors at the Geographic thought it was too, and they published it. So what else? Well, Boston's known for the Boston Pops, right? The big festival on the river downtown and the big band shell in the summer is really interesting. You look at the color in the sky. This is their big 4th of July celebration, and later, of course, they set off fireworks. Now, the problem here is getting the best vantage point for shooting. The whole city's down there. Everybody's jockeying for position. I'd done my research though, and I knew that I could get access to a rooftop and I could make good pictures up there. Not only a loose shot, but a little bit tighter too, to show some of the boats, the people listening to the music. What else do you think about when you think about Boston? This is exactly how I problem solve, believe me. I think Fenway Park. What do? I had permission to go down by the players down low on the field to shoot the sports action, but I didn't really want that. I wanted a feel for the place. This is a signature ballpark. In America it is even. So you know what I ended up doing? I just went up in the stands. I bought a general admission ticket, went up there, see the whole place, and then you got a nice scene. This is what you would see if you were at a Red Sox game on a Friday night. This is it. That works. That worked for the magazine. So anytime I work in a city, I'm always thinking about what the people do there for fun. What is it culturally about this city makes it tick? These all give me something interesting to shoot, or at least think about, trying to figure things out. Is the city really proud of its sports team, proud of its urban parks? Are they proud that they have giant skyscrapers, that they have great ethnic neighborhoods, that they're physically located in a great place? Just depends. Cities are really amazing if you think about the amount of energy that's being consumed in them. Cities are like electrified beehives to me. And that was one of my problems to solve in Boston. How to show that for my overview picture for this story for National Geographic. So this is what I ended up with. How did this come up? How did this come about? To do this shot, I first looked from the base of the Customs House, which is what you're seeing here. It's kind of a clock tower building. From the Customs House, I could see a skyscraper across the freeway, and I thought that would be a good place to show the Customs House. Turned out to be a residential building, apartments. So I went to that building, I found somebody who lived there, talked to people, smiled a little bit, got myself invited in, found somebody who would allow me up to shoot out their apartment window. So this shot actually is a very long exposure, probably 10 seconds or so, a little bit more. I wanted to get all the traffic lights moving like a river, coming and going. And you can see the white lights and the red tail lights going, the sun's setting. For just a few minutes, the end of the day, you get this glow in the sky that balances out with the red of the taillights and the white of the headlights. It all balances out. And you can really define the landscape only when there's still that touch of light in the sky. You can see the tops of the buildings outlined very well. You get the color in the streets, and it all matches up. The light balances out. That window of time, that's really something important to work. I think about that all the time. To be able to show a city and have it be colorful, lyrical, and beautiful like that. That to me is a problem solved. And it satisfied my bosses at the National Geographic, and here I am still working for them, so that's good. There's a technical aspect of photography to think about though. What lens to use, what lights, what time of day, where to be, composition, subject. These are all problems, but you can run into other hurdles as well. My talented assistant of 13 years, Katie, has asked me to tell you the snail story as part of this lecture on problem solving. The snail story goes something like this. Once upon a time, there was a young photographer, let's call him Joel. He was assigned to do a story on the Endangered Species Act. One of the smallest critters on the endangered species list was called the Bruno, Idaho hot springs snail. It was a little creature that was confined to one little hot springs in rural Idaho. It lives in hot water, which makes it actually kind of a remarkable creature. Well, I went out to this hot springs with the rancher that owns the place. Nice guy. I thought, this snail is the size of a pencil eraser. How do I show this? How do I give it size perspective? How do I make this interesting? Well, I thought, I got it. Okay, let's put this snail on the rancher's fingernail. Okay, so we get the snail, we put it on the rancher's finger, and it has this kind of mottled brown shell, and it is what it is, and we do some pictures. I say thanks, and I drive off to the next shoot location about 200 miles away. A couple days later, I talked to the biologist who is the expert in this country on that snail. And I described the snail to him because he'd led me to the place in the first place. I described it to him on the phone. And he says, how big was it? I said, size of a pencil eraser. It was tiny. He says, well, you know, there's 2 species of snail in that spring, and you photographed the wrong one, the common species. The Bruno, Idaho hot spring snail, the one you want, is much smaller than that. And I said, smaller? He said, yeah, it's like size of a grain of pepper, maybe. So, how do I solve the problem? Only one way. I had to head back. I had to go back. There's 2 of them right there. They are tiny. I had to go all the way back, grab the couple again, go all the way down to the hot springs, find the right snail, which took forever. This time we used the wife, of course, because she had nicer looking nails. So, lesson here, know what you're doing or end up with the wrong snail. Simple as that. And finally, I wanted to leave you with one more pearl of wisdom from a friend of mine. And this is a basic truth in photography. I say this almost every day, or I think it. If you want your pictures to be more interesting, stand in front of more interesting stuff. Pretty clear, isn't it? Interesting stuff, good light, good composition. That's it, really. Visual problem solved. So your assignment, look back over some of the first pictures you took during this course. Chances are there's some visual problems you were not able to overcome, were there? Go back, rethink, and reshoot one of those situations till you're satisfied with the picture. Can you do that for me? Pretend I'm going to be looking at that new picture you've just taken. Imagine what I'm going to say to you. If the horizon's crooked, I'm going to nail you. If you've got a phone pole or a tree sticking out of somebody's head, I'm really going to nail you. That is not acceptable. Not now. Not now. You're better than that. If you're shooting something in lousy light, please don't, unless you want to, I guess. You know better now. Never shoot a picture in lousy light unless, of course, you figure out a way to make it beautiful. And don't compose things poorly either unless there's a great reason. That is a must, okay? A must. So in our next lecture, one of the biggest problems that happens in photography is after the snap, as in workflow and organization, especially in this digital era. If you're shooting thousands and thousands of pictures and they're all digital, how in the world are you ever going to find them? That's what we're going to talk about in our next lecture. It is critically important, so stay tuned.